Welcome to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. Well, you know, that's not a rib.
She pooted.
What a rib? No,
There's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared of shit.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you.
Give me double cheeseburger, double cheese, double mayo, double onion, motherfucker.
Bruce Pritchard.
Hey, it's Conrad the Mortgage Guy, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man?
What a question mark. It's like it's a question about whose show it might be. Conrad, I've been doing this show since about the 90s by now. I don't even know who Bruce Pritchard is anymore. I have his number in my phone. I can't get hold of him. Guys have had amputations of their head and have missed less time than Bruce has missed on this show. Conrad, let me ask you a question. How many best ofs have we had to play with me on the show?
Okay.
None.
Well, that's fair. Yes, correct. 0. You've been here every week. I'll agree with that.
That's right, because I've been here every week because I'm loyal to you, to Dave Silva, also known as the Stud Muffin, and to all of our wonderful fans out there. Most of them I blocked on social media.
Well, I appreciate that. And I will say, even today we are a day late, but that's on me. That's not on you. You were here. You were ready. So I agree. You have been committed.
I was here yesterday. I was here at this seat. I actually talked to Dave Silva. We actually told a whole bunch of stories that we probably can't tell on the podcast because they were a little bad.
I bet there was a few about Oklahoma in there. If I had,
there were a bunch about Oklahoma. I got a newsletter from Oklahoma that some Native American signed me up for that I'm really not very happy about. Oklahoma's got a lot of news. They got new meth labs. They got new bingo parlors. Somebody learned how to read. I mean, Oklahoma, big things are happening up there. There's actually one car left in Oklahoma. About 18 people, like a clown car, are going to try to get out of Oklahoma and escape with it that way. That's why we need a wall between Oklahoma and Texas, but that is a separate issue. But Conrad, let me ask you a question, a very important question. In all the years that Bruce Pritchard was here, the Dark Ages is what your staff calls it. All your staff calls it that. Wow. Dave Green, Dave Silva, all these Daves. You got everybody named Dave. Dave Letterman, everybody who's working for the show named Dave. They call it the Dark Ages. How many ads did Bruce Pritchard sell?
Well, I mean, we do have a sales force, Dave and Taylor and the gang. I don't
wait. No, not how many ads did the sales force sell? That's
how many did Bruce personally? That's what Bruce you mean.
Personally, how many ads did Bruce Pritchard personally sell?
It'd be 0, Ghost Rider.
Wow, 0. So under like you had like 0.5 like on the betting chart of like Bruce, you'd take the under and you would win easily with Bruce on selling ads.
Yeah, you would take the under. That seems fair. You would take the under. And listen, I have to admit you have done a good job. I mean, I was talking to Dave Green in St. Louis over the weekend, and he told me that downloads for our podcast feed are up 35% with you.
Holy shit! What? They're what?
Yeah, they're up 35%.
They're up 35%.
Yeah.
Our downloads are up 35% since I took over for that other guy, whatever his name is. I've got his action figure right here, by the way. This is his action figure.
Okay.
That's him here.
I love you.
I love you. Yeah. So downloads are up 35%.
That's what Dave tells me. Yeah.
Holy shit. No wonder I could sell an ad. I mean, I went and sold an ad like easy. It was really easy.
Wait, hang on. You sold an ad?
Dave didn't tell you?
No, I mean, I know that we're going to be talking about Soul today and Stopbox and Blue Chew and Legal Buddy and all that, but I didn't know that you sold an ad.
Oh, yeah, and it's already queued up and everything. Dave Silva's got it all ready. I mean, you can play the ad. This is a legitimate ad that I sold with legitimate people, and they're all fans of the show, but they're paying to be on our show now because I sold an ad.
Okay, well.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
And now, time for some totally legitimate, real-life testimonies of real people who really love Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.
Hi, this is Doug. Now, I'm not saying John Layfield is the greatest podcaster of all time. but I am saying I canceled my gym membership just to listen to him yell at Conrad every week. I mean, who needs abs when you've got laughs like these?
Hey, this is Garrick. JBL's voice alone can cure boredom, inspire confidence, and maybe, just maybe, get you to buy a Longhorn Ranch in Texas.
Yes, those were totally legitimate, real-life testimonies of real people who really love Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.
I gotta admit, I mean, downloads are up, and you
35%.
And you sold, I guess technically you sold 100% more ads than Bruce. So
100% because he sold 0. I sold 1.
Yeah.
And I'm just getting started. I may have more ads next week.
That's what the listeners want. They've spoken. They want more ads, and we're going to work hard on bringing them to you next week.
Bradshaw 316 says it's my fucking podcast.
Okay. That may be a new shirt coming soon. Here on Something to Wrestle. Bradshaw 316 says it's my fucking podcast. I can't help but notice you're sporting a new shirt today too. Another wrestling god tee. Look at you, man.
Sir.
Of course, we've got the Arrive, Clothesline, Leave shirt, and a whole lot more available for you now at somethingtowrestlemerch.com. Maybe by this time next week, we'll have the Bradshaw 316 shirt. I love that, man. You're like you're an innovator. I like that you're engaged, by God. We couldn't get Bruce engaged. We don't even know where he is. We've got an all points bulletin out, and that's right. An APB for Brother Love. What do you think? Will we ever find that guy?
No, because I doubt anybody will search.
Okay. That's fair. And something I have to admit,
It's like you call the headquarters, where the headquarters is. Hey, Bruce is missing. I'm like, so?
Oh gosh. Well, let's jump right into some nostalgia today. We appreciate you guys joining us, and thank you for your patience here on Something to Wrestle. I had a little 5-alarm fire here at the office yesterday. We got it put out, and we are excited to be here with you on a Tuesday morning. And John, I can't believe this is real. This is making me feel old. But 29 years ago this week was Buried Alive. The very first Buried Alive. It was In Your House Buried Alive. It happened on pay-per-view from the Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, Indiana. It feels like so many important things in history happened at the Market Square Arena in Indianapolis. Why do you think that building is so synonymous with the WWF?
I think it's because it's a great crowd. You know, you want to do stuff in front of great crowds. You had terrific crowds, you know, like for instance, Austin 316. Wisconsin was always a great crowd to us. You know, we didn't always sell out. Rosemont was a terrific crowd for us. Of course, you know, the Madison Square Garden is as iconic as it could be, but there were a lot of great buildings that we did really well with. We knew the crowds were going to be fantastic. Staples Center out in Los Angeles, we knew these arenas were going to be packed, and we knew these arenas were going to be live with the crowd when we went there.
I think that's actually the building where they did the whole Andre winning the title deal and the dual, you know, twin referee angle. And there's so many magical moments that happened at that arena. I know we always talk about Chicago and the Allstate Arena and the Rosemont Horizon, whatever you want to call it. But man, Market Square Arena, so much history. But first things first, when we think back on that In Your House Buried Alive match in 1996, October of 96, you were in the opening dark match going what was reported at the time as being a 20-minute match against Barry Windham. We know eventually you guys become partners and great friends, but at this point, Barry is just back in as the stalker. We've never seen any video of this match, so I got to ask, how did it go? And was this a thrill to you to get that much time with a guy that I know you looked up to and thought so much of?
It was a huge thrill to me, and it was, you know, the people joked Barry hadn't wrestled in years, and I blew up and Barry didn't, was the joke that I think Bruce made backstage. That's why I took his podcast, because he was mean to me. He was a bully is what he is. But yeah, Barry came in, and I was a huge fan of Barry Windham, obviously. Now, I got a little anecdote. I didn't know if I had a little heat with Barry or not, because when I started wrestling, I'm literally am from Sweetwater, Texas. Blackjack Mulligan, his dad, said he was from Sweetwater. And so when Gary Hart heard that, he was doing commentary. He goes, you know, John is Barry Windham's cousin. So people started saying I was Barry Windham's cousin. I never said it because I didn't want to steal somebody's name or get booked because of something like that. But it had been said a lot of times around that I was Barry's cousin because Gary Hart had said that on commentary. And so I never knew if I had heat with Barry or not. Sure enough, Barry hadn't even heard of it. Didn't care. I don't think he would have cared anyway. Barry's a really good dude. Barry was awesome. Barry hadn't worked in a long time. And we just kind of talked about things backstage and went out there and worked. And it was fantastic. I mean, I was out there with Barry Windham. Barry hadn't got hurt. Barry would have been NWA champ forever. He was that freaking good. People say that Randy Orton reminds people of Barry Windham. Man, that's a huge compliment. I think it's true. But, man, that's how good Barry Windham is. And he was that good then. He had worked it a long time, went out there and we just had a match. And Barry was Barry Windham. It was fantastic.
I do want to ask, I've talked a lot to David Crockett over at adfreeshows.com. We have a little series called The Book, and we go through his brother's red book, the old booking books of who was working where in what town, how many tickets sold, what was the gate, all that sort of thing. And we've had some pretty in-depth conversations about Barry Windham because I think most people listening to this or watching this, if they're watching on YouTube at somethingtowrestle.com, they know that Barry Windham was one of the best wrestlers in the world in like 85, 86, 87, 88. And the NWA never pulled the trigger. And when I talked to Crockett about it, he made it almost seem as if it wasn't an aspiration of Barry's. Like Barry didn't really want the responsibility of being the NWA touring champion because let's be honest, it was a miserable existence. You're on the road all the time. You're in a different town every night. So it was not so much about, did he have the talent to do it? It was more about, hey, his quality of life, that just didn't really work for him. That's not something he wanted. And I've talked to Road Dogg about his dad, Bullet Bob, like, hey, why didn't he ever try to spend more time in New York or, try to expand to a more national platform? But he lived on the beach. He had life like he liked it, and so I get it. When you get comfortable, like Jerry Lawler comes to mind. Jerry Lawler had talent that could have been a much bigger opportunity outside of just Memphis, but when you're making a bunch of money and you're in your bed most nights and you got a lot of control and a lot of say over your career, that's hard to beat. Do you think that was more the case with Barry or was it something else?
I think it was more something else. I've heard that before about Barry's, perceived lackadaisical attitude. He was just so talented that he could go out there and do anything he wanted. I disagree with that, being, friends with Barry and traveling with Barry for over a year. Or right at it, however long it was. We're together all the time. And Barry was a guy who didn't politic. And I think that hurt him more than anything. Barry was not going to lobby for being NWA champion. Barry was not going to put his guys on his side, like a lot of guys would do back then and make sure that they had guys going to the NWA annual convention that would lobby for them. Barry wouldn't do that. Barry was just a stand-up dude that had let his talent speak for itself. And so I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think people can look at that from 30,000 feet down and say, well, maybe that's a lack of motivation. It wasn't a lack of motivation. Barry just didn't kiss anybody's ass. And Barry didn't lobby for anything. He was talented. He could go out there and work with anybody. And I never talked to him about it, about being NWA champion. I just think he probably always thought it was a natural progression to happen. Of course, then he got hurt. I think they should have pulled the trigger. I think Barry would have been a great NWA champion. Would have been one of the best of all time.
We know eventually he did become the world champ, but it was much later in WCW, but he did have some classic battles with Ric Flair. There's no doubt that he's one of the best to ever do it. And one of the things I hear wrestlers often say about Barry Windham, John, is that he was just a natural as far as positioning. He knew where to be and when to be there, that sort of thing. Can you speak to that and give us any concrete examples of what that even means?
Yeah, he used to get in the ring. I've never seen anybody do it the way he put his knee on the apron and then just kind of step right into the ring. It was just Barry was just smoother than everybody else. And I'd see him, they weren't using him that much. And he wasn't going to lobby for or kiss anybody's ass to get used. He was just going to show up and do his job. We were in Kansas City one time and we were wrestling, I think it was Furnace and LaFawn. I'm not sure. We wrestled Test and Albert there too, but I think it was Furnace and LaFawn that we wrestled there. Must have wrestled there a couple times. I think. I'm not sure. You can check it all on the internet. But I think was in Kansas City, and the place went crazy for Barry because they remember him from the NWA days. Man, that Barry Windham, he turned back the clock 10 years that night. It was just amazing. I'm sitting there on the apron going, my God, man, I'm seeing one of the greatest of all time at his freaking peak. I mean, Barry could still go. Barry could do anything he wanted. It was so easy to Barry. He would explain it to you, and he would explain things to me, but he just kind of assumed everybody else kind of had a knowledge like he had. And he would go out there and he could do anything in that ring. There was nothing. I mean, with Barry Windham, there was nothing called in the back. He didn't need it. He just went out there and felt the crowd and could do what he wanted. And he could do anything. He was a guy's, like a lot of those old guys. And I put Barry in the old category. I guess we are old. We're all old now. He could just absolutely do anything.
We all love Barry Windham. We spent a little bit of time talking about the NWA era. I do want to talk about the 2 stints in the WWF. I mean, we know that he's going to be there in this era, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I really loved as a kid, one of the first times I remember seeing him was as the Widowmaker. What did you think of that presentation?
I thought it was good, and I don't know if Vince, really had an idea of what to do with him. Vince didn't have a great grasp of wrestling outside of WWE. People would tell him stuff and he would hear names, but Vince was a workaholic. He was busy working on his business all the time, so he didn't see a lot of stuff outside of it. I know, obviously, he knew Barry's dad, and he and Jack Lanza were dear friends. And so I don't know, where Vince's mindset came from with Barry. I thought it was great, and I thought Barry could get anything over, and I don't know why Barry didn't end up staying quite a bit longer with the Widowmaker. I thought the Stalker was horrible. I thought it was terrible. Barry hated it too.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I do want to talk about that. As a reminder, Barry had at least 3 stints. We know there was the WrestleMania 1 stint where he's there with, I guess that was his brother-in-law, Mike Rotunda at the time. And they're going to be the US Express Tag Team Champions. And then, eventually we know that he's going to come back as the Widowmaker, which is my personal favorite. But when he comes back as the Stalker, and Bruce has told us the story before, I guess this was born out of there being an interview, or not an interview, but a conversation really between Vince and Barry. And when Vince understood what an avid hunter Barry was, he thought, well, that's part of his personality. Let's make that a thing. And this is the era where, hey, we're going to make Bob Holly a race car driver, and we're going to make Duke Drosay a garbage man. So it's the occupational gimmick. And now we've got a hunter, I guess. I don't know. What, if any, conversation did you have with Barry about how he gets saddled with this Stalker gimmick?
Yeah, and we also had Henry Godwin as a pig farmer. Henry was, he told Vince, the story that he told Vince, what do you do? And he literally told him, I'm a pig farmer. And so that's how Henry Godwin became a pig farmer. Vince was wanting realistic things, to be part of people's character. And Barry's hunting background, which Barry did, Kern, did he shoot Kern, or Kern shot him with the 9mm? I mean, I
don't know this story. I need to hear this story.
Yeah, so they're out shooting. They're out shooting on the road. I believe it's Kern shot Barry. One of the ones they're shooting at they pull off like they're shooting at a roadside. They all had guns, back in the day, and they just would shoot stuff going down the road because the cops didn't do nothing. And so they pull over and they're shooting at a sign, and the way the sign had been bent, the bullet hits and comes right back and goes in Barry's leg. Barry rolls down the hill, and Kern's like, "Get up, you big baby!" He goes, "You shot me, you bastard!" He goes, "It's just a leg wound." Yeah. So Kern shot Barry with a 9mm gun.
What a fascinating human being Barry Windham is. We know he had the initial run. He's going to taste that tag team gold. He's there during the rock and wrestling era, the launch of WrestleMania. He comes back for a cup of coffee in 1989, and I think that's around the time that his father got in a little bit of legal trouble, and maybe he went home to take care of things for a bit. But Vince is open to bringing him back in 96. Lots of people have had multiple stints with the company, but sometimes it feels like, I don't know, you're once and you're out of here. Why did Vince and Barry always get back together? It feels like Vince must have had a lot of respect for Barry to bring him back twice.
I think Vince had a ton of respect for Barry and for Barry's work, both. Vince, you could tell, really liked Barry, and I don't know what it was that he liked. Maybe before he got to know him better, Barry was just a cool dude, is just a cool dude. I mean, he's just a guy you want to hang out with and have beers with. Barry's just a cool guy. He knows everything. I mean, literally, Barry knows how to fix cars. If something wrong, if something goes wrong in your hotel room, Barry can fix it. I mean, Barry's one of those guys. Barry can do anything. He's just a smart, handy guy. He's just a cool dude, and people just love Barry. Plus, he can drink. Good Lord, man. He has the freaking level of a freaking dinosaur or a freaking elephant. I've never hardly seen anybody drink like Barry and not be drunk. It's just amazing. He's just a cool dude. And I think that's what Vince probably liked about Barry. Vince liked just stand-up guys. Barry Windham was a stand-up dude. He was not going to stooge anybody. He was not going to rat on anybody. Barry was just going to show up to work and do, what he's supposed to do. He's a guy that you don't mess with. He's a guy that has a huge backbone. I think that appealed to Vince. I know when he came in, Jake Roberts was an agent, and he came around. He was talking to Barry. He was trying to help Barry, and he goes, "And what would a stalker do?" And Barry, you could tell, was just frustrated with that. He goes, he just kind of blew him off, because he didn't like the gimmick. You could tell Barry did not like the stalker gimmick. It was something that Barry didn't understand. He didn't really like it. I think he came in hoping he would do something and get out of it pretty quick and do something else.
Well, we're big Barry Windham fans here, and I got to ask, I know this is maybe a silly question, but we know that he is the uncle of Bo Dallas and Bray Wyatt, rest in peace. But I think Barry has a few kids himself. Why don't you think his kids ever decided to pursue wrestling? They didn't, as far as I know of, or am I wrong on that?
No, not that I know of. And if Barry has kids, I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm his friend. I know he was married when we were together, but I didn't know he had kids.
Oh, okay. Maybe I got my wire.
Maybe I'm wrong about that. What a great friend I am. What a dick I am.
So listen, let's talk about the actual pay-per-view, In Your House, Buried Alive. The show feels a little bit thrown together. We get a heel versus heel match, but what's interesting is it's the first ever televised match between Steve Austin and Triple H. And we know a few years later, these guys are going to be absolutely tearing it up. But this is 1 month before Bret Hart has his iconic match with Steve Austin has his match with Bret Hart at Survivor Series. And we're still a ways away from, Hunter becoming the king of the ring and a part of DX and all of that. But I think it's interesting to take a look back and see the seeds of what is to come with a heel Triple H and a heel Stone Cold. You're sharing a locker room with those guys. You're in a dark match. You're all trying to climb the ladder. Could you tell that these guys were going to be stars right away? Or when did it click for you that, oh, these guys are going to make it?
Yeah, you don't know. You have great workers sometimes don't become big stars, and guys that are smart sometimes don't become big stars. Inexplicably. I say not big stars. Massive stars like they became. They didn't become big stars. They transcended the whole genre. They became so freaking big. I don't know if anybody could see that. I remember working with Hunter. We were in that Catholic Youth Center, and I can't think where it was. Anyway, it was a heel versus heel match there. It was a little house show, and I just remember realizing how good Hunter was. You don't know how good a guy is until you really get in the ring with him. And we had never worked against each other, I don't believe. We had a singles match just out of the blue. It was something they needed to put together because probably somebody no-showed or something. They put me out there with Hunter and, both heels. Of course, who are you going to take as a as the baby face, the aristocratic guy or the old Southern Texan, of course you're going to take, the heel's going to be Hunter, and Hunter was terrific. I mean, I was blown away by how good he was in the ring. And, same with Steve. Steve was, fantastic. But, we all knew how good Steve was because I'd seen him so much more. Hunter, I hadn't. And it was a pleasant surprise about how good he was. I didn't assume he was bad. I just didn't realize he was that freaking good. So I think we knew that these guys were going to be huge stars. But Steve was in Hollywood Blondes. And him and Brian were freaking incredible. But that wasn't a gimmick that was going to take him to the top of either WCW or WWE. He just had a little luck happen and he became the biggest star. And thank God, because everything I have right now around me is because of Steve Austin, became the biggest star in wrestling.
The match you were just talking about at the CYC was in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and it was a house show on August 11th, 1996. So there you go.
Yeah, they just put me and Hunter together out there, and Lanza goes, whoever they take babyface goes over. He didn't even give a shit. Nobody cared. It didn't matter. The match was a heel versus heel. Neither one of us were getting a push. And I just remember getting out there with Hunter, and it was he was so freaking good. He just surprised me. He's really calm. He's really calm the way he calls things and stuff. And he was the heel, so he was calling it, or at least most of it. And I just remember being blown away by how good he was, how smart he was out there in the ring.
We got to talk about this match. I want to challenge you. If you're going to go back and watch the Buried Alive pay-per-view, don't just fast forward to the main event. We are going to talk about Mankind and The Undertaker. But first, this Steve Austin Triple H match. Now, at the time, he's not called Triple H. It's Hunter Hearst Helmsley. He's the Blue Blood. It's fascinating to see them early. But what's fascinating about this show in particular is this, in my opinion, is when it all clicks for Steve Austin with the fans. They debut him with the new custom music. Now, don't get me wrong. He's been around for a while, but now this is the Stone Cold persona. And with that iconic music, the glass breaks and here he comes. It became such a big part of his presentation, but it's this show on In Your House, Buried Alive, October of 96, where he actually debuts it. And you can tell the fans are with it. And I think sometimes we sort of overlook how important theme music can be. But now we all know, with the benefit of hindsight, when that glass breaks, it becomes Pavlovian. I mean, some of the biggest pops in history happened with that theme music. And he's coming to the ring here, and we know he's been calling out Bret Hart. He's going to turn the volume up on that. He's 1 month away from a big-time match against Bret Hart, who's really been the face that runs the place for years and years for the WWF. That theme music, man, that was like the rocket to me. That was the light switch. If he kept the same old music, I don't know that it would have clicked as well as it did, but the fans started to take notice. He's a heel, but fans are interacting with him. They're behind it because it was just fucking cool, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was cool. And it debuted against the right guy. I mean, if you debut this against a top babyface or something, I'm not sure it works as well. I mean, I don't know if Vince thought this through or Steve or Hunter thought this through, but he debuted it against the right guy. I'm telling you, at the CYC Center in Scranton, nobody hardly knew who Justin Hawk Bradshaw was, and I was over like freaking Rover with, because it was Hunter. I was against Hunter. Hunter was a hell of a heel, and he was a good heel in the ring. And I think a lot of this had to do with the theme song about who he debuts it against. And you have two heels out there. One is kind of cool. One is not cool at all in Hunter. He's just a pure heel, just a pure rich guy heel. And he did a wonderful job at it. I think so. A lot of it had to do with who he was against, the reaction that Steve got.
I do want to ask, when you're taking a look at where he was at this point, he's still very much a heel. He'd previously been paired with the $1 Million Man. He was the $1 Million champion, and he was the ringmaster. That was all heel stuff. He's still going to be a heel here because he's calling out the babyface Bret Hart. Was there a moment where you remember thinking, hey, he's a heel right now, but he is going to be a huge babyface? Because I know when Ted DiBiase told Austin that, Austin didn't want to hear it, wanted to be a heel, thought that was the worst thing he could have possibly told him. But was there a point when he was so good as a heel, you thought it's inevitable, he's going to be a huge babyface?
Yes, I think, yeah, nearly all of us thought that, I believe. I'd have to, ask other guys that were in the dressing room, but you'd see him go out there and his reaction was getting better and better and better. Now, after the Austin 316, it's just, man, it's just a matter of time. All you got to do is just boop, and it's done. But Steve was so entertaining and he was so good in the ring. You had a hard time booing him. I mean, it's just a guy that could work like that. I mean, Steve was a hell of a worker. I always thought that one of the big differences between us and WCW, one was our production, and Kevin Dunn and Chris Chambers and all those guys. That was the biggest thing. But the other thing was that our top guys, you couldn't get Steve to go under 30 minutes. You could tell Steve only go 20 minutes tonight. He's going to go 40. It's Steve. I've seen Steve go out there and just have barn burner night after night after night. You just couldn't shut him down, man. He's like the ever-ready bunny. And a guy that worked like that, you'd sit there and watch him go, there's no way this guy's going to stay a heel. Absolutely no way. He can do whatever the hell he wants, but it's not going to work. And, you could see almost this xenophobic thing coming with the Canadians, where Brett was going to be babyface in Canada. It was crazy. Babyface in Canada and a heel down in the States, and vice versa with all of the American wrestlers, babyface in the States and heel up in Canada. It was a pretty cool time. But yeah, you could see it that this guy was a different level, and he was not going to be a heel that long. Now, I don't think anybody could predict he becomes the biggest draw probably in the history of wrestling, but I think people knew he was the guy.
Well, speaking of the guy, I need to know, who was the guy who said to themselves, "Self, you know what's never been done in wrestling before? Why don't we bury a motherfucker? Not just figuratively like we all do in the back, but I mean literally with shovels and dirt live on pay-per-view." When you remember hearing they're going to do a buried alive main event, and it's not just where they, as I think Sean Waltman would say, pencil fuck the guys, but instead, no, they're actually literally going to dig a hole and put a man in it and then cover it up with dirt. How was that received amongst the boys in the locker room? Is this a little silly, a little scary, a little stupid combination of this?
There were times JR kind of heard that expression and didn't come to the dressing room for a while. The old pencil fuck. Yeah. We had some pretty spontaneous combustible guys that sometimes probably should be avoided, even by the booker. I remember hearing this and I didn't know what we're going to do. I damn sure didn't know, because I'm one of the ones that buried him, right?
Yeah, you're out there helping at the end of the match.
I couldn't remember if it was there or San Antonio. I thought it was San Antonio. I'll tell you how bad I am. I thought we did anyway, but I remember hearing this and thinking, it's going to have something. You don't know if it's going to be cool or not. Sometimes when you try stuff, it comes across really bad. And sometimes when you do stuff, it comes across really cool. So I think the jury was completely out from the boys, because we've seen some stuff end up in disasters that we thought were going to be cool. And we've seen some stuff ended up really cool that we thought would be disasters. So you never know until it plays out.
So you show up to the building that day and there's a giant mound of dirt and there's already a hole there and there's a headstone that the company still has, and they have it in the warehouse, and it still tickles me to see it to this day. And I know this is a magic trick, and I know that there's a little escape pod or whatever on the side, but take me through that day when, as best as you can remember, of how you guys are going to pull this off. Is this something that requires a giant walkthrough, or what do you remember?
No, they didn't even smarten us up, the guys that were doing the burying, up to what was being done. Now we saw it, because we were there all day. So we saw all the stuff, underneath the mound and all that stuff. But they didn't even smarten us up, because it wasn't important to us. We're just supposed to fill a hole in. So it wasn't like, hey guys, here's how we're doing it. It's all safe. Don't worry about it. I mean, I think they were hoping that we knew that somebody wasn't actually getting buried. So we didn't have to be smartened up to it, but we're just told to get a bunch of shovels and fill up a grave, which is one of the dumbest things they ever thought that somebody could do.
It's probably not the best idea. Now, it's clearly something that wasn't all that well thought out. I don't believe this is when Vince Russo is knee deep in booking. Do you think Russo's involved at this point? I remember him being on Livewire in like January of 97. So that's just a couple of months after this. So maybe he was. Was this a Russo idea? Is it a Vince McMahon idea? If you had to guess, what would you bet?
If I had to guess, it's a Vince idea, because the hand coming up and the buried alive, it just sounds like Vince. I'm talking about Vince McMahon. It just sounds like Vince McMahon. Now, maybe it was Vince Russo. I don't remember the timeline when Russo was there and when Russo wasn't. But this to me sounds something. And if I'm wrong, I certainly could be. This sounds to me like something like Vince will come up with. We're gonna bury him alive. We're gonna bury him on live TV. I can see Vince coming up with this. This seems like 100% a Vince McMahon idea.
I'm curious how you remember feeling about some of the effects. Like, we're going to have a lightning strike right in the middle of the building, and then the Undertaker's glove will come through the top and let everybody know that he's not dead. He's actually alive. That's a little over the top for me. And I know that, in my WWE fan group circles, this is almost blasphemous.
Oh, that's October 20th. I didn't realize.
Yeah, dude, it's unbelievable that we're doing this on the anniversary of this, but What I'm driving at is here.
I just saw that on the tombstone, so that's why I was.
Watch this with us here at somethingtowrestle.com. John, it was a year prior to this, Halloween Havoc 95, where we saw the Yeti come down and buttfuck Hulk Hogan at Halloween Havoc right after the Giant had been shoved off of the top of a building and then came back to life a few years later to win the world title in his very first match. So that was a stretch. That was a bridge too far. That was a bit of a stretch for wrestling fans, and they still make fun of that silliness all these years later. But just 1 year later, we're going to bury a guy alive, and then he will summon lightning, and then his hand will pop up through the grave. And this all happens just 1 year after the silliness of that Dungeon of Doom situation a year prior. But people continue to clown on the WCW stuff, but this buried alive match is not ridiculed nearly enough for me. If this would have been a Dungeon of Doom idea, people would still be shitting on this today, but this gets a pass. Is that the power of the Undertaker, or to the victor go the spoils, and nobody talks about it that way because it was the WWF?
No, it's the power of the Undertaker. 100%. If this had been done with somebody else, I mean, this was a horrible idea. The whole thing was freaking preposterous, and it's, WWE had been getting bashed since the Papa Shango stuff and the Warrior throwing up and all this stuff and the caskets and all these things. I mean, you're wrestling purist, hated this stuff, and absolutely hated it. I'd go back down to Texas going, oh, those guys are ruining wrestling. Every one of those guys would have gone to work for Vince in a heartbeat. Before the phone call got over, they'd have been booking their flight to go up there. They just loved bashing it because, one, it was fun to bash, but two, they didn't have a job there. That's where most of it come from. The WCW stuff, that was horrible. This was a terrible idea. It worked. It worked because of the Undertaker. I mean, the burial that guy alive, and you see that hand coming up at the end, that place went crazy. I mean, Conrad, I was there, and you think, okay, no one's going to believe you're actually burying a guy alive. I believe Crush was out there. Dustin was out there. Is that right? That was part of the group that was out there. Because I believe I told Crush, there's Crush and Dustin. I believe I told Crush, brother, watch your back. Somebody's going to come over that rail. Because the fans were in shock and horror about this. They thought we were burying him alive. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, they thought we were putting a human being in the dirt and burying him alive. And I remember telling Crush, brother, you better watch the crowd. Somebody's coming over that rail. That was what I was thinking at the time, because people were just looking at it like, I can't believe that they're doing this. This is too much, too far that they're going with this storyline. And so the people bought it. As crazy as that is, with the lightning, with the hand, I don't know if you suspend belief enough to think, okay, this is actually happening, or you just want to get involved and you care. Maybe that's what it is.
I couldn't help but notice one of the guys standing out there was Terry Gordy in his executioner get up. Was that gimmick doomed from the start, or was it never going to work with Terry? This was really a favor to Doc Hendricks, aka Michael Hayes, and he just wasn't capable of doing it at that level anymore. What do you think it was?
He wasn't capable anymore. And I love Gordy. And people ask me all the time where I got, about my clothesline from. It wasn't from Stan. I got it from Gordy. I mean, the way Gordy threw the clothesline with like a baseball, that's where I got the clothesline. I 100% stole most of my stuff when I started from Gordy, not from Windham and not from Stan. People, always thought I stole it from Barry Windham and Stan Hansen. Man, I copied almost everything Gordy did. There was a time Gordy would take a backdrop, off a power bomb. He'd hold on to the guy and he'd roll over with him, get back up, and still go ahead and give it to him. I stole that from him. Nobody did. I remember I did that with WWE with Tommy Dreamer. People say, "Oh, I've never seen that before." Well, I have. I've seen it freaking 50 times. That's why I stole it from Terry Gordy. Gordy was different level, man. He was. We're having a big man thing coming up, and I didn't mention Gordy, so we got to make an amends here and put Gordy in there as one of the greatest big men of all time. Gordy was just incredible. Unfortunately, the incident that happened, he wasn't the same Gordy. He was just still the nicest guy. He was a wonderful human being, but he had lost more than a step in the ring, and I think that was just a favor to Michael. And God bless Vince for doing it, and God bless Vince for putting him under a hood so you wouldn't expose the fact that it was Terry Gordy and ruin his legacy, which is what I understood was the reason Vince put him under a hood.
I do want to ask, we're talking, of course, about the Buried Alive match from 1996. The Undertaker, he's had some stinkers through the years, and it was never his fault necessarily. He was paired with some regrettable opponents, and I know he loves to bust Bruce's balls about that. How do you think the real life Mark Calloway felt about the idea of a Buried Alive match? Was he in favor of that, or did he think this is fucking stupid?
He had Giant Gonzalez, so it's obviously a step up from that. My God, he got the worst. He got some of the worst shit you could ever believe because he was so freaking good. It's kind of like a guy like Dolph Ziggler. I've said for a long time, a guy like Dolph gets abused by a creative team because he can do anything. Here's a guy who could be champion, and he was champion, a great champion. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, and he should be a Hall of Famer. But Dolph is so freaking good that you can put him out there with anybody, somebody that can't work, and get him over. Billy Gunn was like that. You put him out there with anybody and can get him over. Undertaker was like that, and he can just do it on a main event level, just like those other guys could as well. And Taker got stuck with it in freaking WrestleManias. Taker got stuck with it in all kinds of big matches. Like, hey, we got this idea. We're going to put this 7-foot tall guy in a muscle suit and like a big freaking half ape, half man. We're going to stick him out there with you. Can he work? No, not at all. You'll be fine. Yeah, he got some of the worst shit in the 90s. There was a lot of bad shit in the 90s. Taker got some of the worst of it because he could work so freaking well. And he could do anything. And I don't know what his thought was. I'd love to talk to him about it and ask him, what would you think when you first talking about getting buried alive? I have a feeling he was probably for it because they'd already done the casket matches, and those were over. Those were really getting over, the casket matches. I was in I was in a bunch of caskets. So they always rib me, they somehow couldn't find, a way to open it once you get in there. It's funny how that always happened. And Taker was always dealing with this shit. But I think Taker was probably for this because I think he knew he could make this work. I mean, Conrad, by the way, I was there live. This thing worked. As crazy as it is and as stupid as it was, this thing worked.
I do want to ask, maybe you remember this, maybe you don't, but I'll never forget being at one of Mick Foley's fabulous one-man comedy shows that he does around the country. Check him out at realmickfoley.com. See where he's coming to a town near you. But at one of those events, I saw him tell the story about how this version of the In Your House pay-per-view, these were only 2-hour shows. So the live crowd still got matches after the televised main event would finish.
Yeah.
So on this particular day, we see a man die. He's buried alive. He's dead and buried. And now lightning has struck the grave and his hand came up and we're off the air. Pay-per-view finishes 3, 2, 1, and the Rockers theme plays. And here comes Al Snow and Marty Jannetty as the new Rockers. Leif Cassidy running to the ring. Little children in the crowd crying, tears running down their face. Their childhood hero, The Undertaker, has been buried alive and he's dead. But coming up next, it's the new Rockers versus the Bushwhackers. Yeah. Did my best, Mick Foley there. Is that not the greatest fucking structuring of a show, formatting of a show in history?
No, it's not. It's close, and it may be second. But I will tell you the first, and this also involves Al Snow. And I love Al Snow. I just had to call him because I wanted to get Cash Flow's number to be on our podcast with me and Gerald Briscoe either this week or next. The Cash Flow, who's Bigfoot, in Tulsa King, is going to be on our show. And I didn't have his number. He's a wonderful guy. I can't wait to get him on our show. But so I had to give to Al's a good friend of mine. We rode together for, oh, good grief, maybe a year. Me, him, and Tom Pritchard and Dutch Mantel. And we had a great time. But it gets worse, Conrad. We're in Cleveland one time. I didn't know how Al had this. Al's got a record of this. So we're in Cleveland one time, and they can't get Stone Cold there. So the place is sold out. So Steve's not going to be there. They can't get Undertaker there. Taker is going to be a no-show. The Rock, they're trying to fly him in private because they got to save this arena because the place is sold freaking out. We didn't fly guys private back then. They're trying to fly the Rock private, but weather is prohibiting him from getting in. So they have to announce that the Rock also will not be there. When they announced this, Conrad, the entire arena starts chanting WWE sucks and we want a refund. It's like Cena sucks. We love Cena. Cena sucks. That stuff. They're going between WWE sucks and we want a refund is what they're chanting. The entire arena. Who goes out next? Al Snow.
Oh, God.
Al Snow has to go out there. And we're sitting there going, oh, my God, this is the worst spot in the history of wrestling. So we're sitting back there with Lance and we're going to watch it because this is like, to those of us who are about to die, we salute you. I mean, this is going to your death. Lanza tells him, Al, just go a couple minutes. Doesn't matter what they say. Just go a couple minutes. Try to make them forget about it and get out of the ring. And when he comes back, the greatest line, one of the greatest lines ever, Al comes back and he's half joking. He goes, boy, we couldn't get him. Ron Simmons goes, could be you.
My God.
Which, of course, it wasn't, but it was, oh, my God. So I didn't know Al had to come out after that. This is twice that Al has had to come out after that one time in Cleveland. We all just sat there and watched Al, his sacrificial lamb, go out there and thought, oh, my God, this is the worst spot in the history of the world. And Al Snow has to go out there while this entire arena is chanting WWE sucks.
How is Al Snow more jacked now than he was when he was active in wrestling?
He looks fantastic.
Well,
he's like Jonathan Winters on Mork and Mindy. He's aging backwards. Him and Billy Gunn. I hate those sumbitches. I mean, I hate them. I hate Billy.
Well, I'm not going to say that because I may have to see him in person, and I know.
Well, I'm going to see him in person too, but he's just like he just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. He's like freaking Thanos. I mean, he looks like Thanos. Billy went like this, the fucking world would end, and we go backward in time. And Al's the same. Al does all that bullshit stuff he does, like the Sheik.
Persian clubs with the Iron Sheik. That's crazy.
Yeah, Al's just like this old school trainer, and he's just a badass. I mean, God bless him, man. Al looks fantastic. He's bigger than he's ever been. So is Billy. God bless these guys, man. I love it. I love these guys. Are in such great shape.
I wish we all loved
I don't want them around me, but I do like that they're in good shape.
We like that they're here. Yeah. We also like that we got to talk about Buried Alive. I still feel like somebody may have been enjoying themselves on an elevated basis when they came up with that idea. Maybe you could come
Conrad, hey, the worst thing was we tried to bury them with fucking shovels.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the tape? We didn't get a foot of dirt in that grave. I mean, we didn't get a foot in that grave. And so we're supposed to sit there and bury this freaking thing. We're like, hey, this is great. We're going to be in the main event match now. And I'm out there. Crush is so blown up. At one point, he's standing on his shovel and he's yelling at the crowd. So he wouldn't, because we're so blown up. We have no chance of filling up this grave. We didn't even get enough dirt in there to hardly cover up the casket or whatever the hell it was in there. I mean, it was a terrible idea. After this, they used a backhoe to fill the grave up because they realized trying to get a bunch of old wrestlers to fill up a grave in a few minutes to end a pay-per-view, it ain't happening. It was a horrible idea. I was so freaking blown up.
Hey, so let's talk about what happened the night after the pay-per-view, John. Bret Hart is going to officially announce in the ring that he has re-signed with the WWF and he hopes to stay with the company forever. In the building that day, Bret did sort of kayfabe the decision, or did he? The fans didn't know. Did you guys know? Did you know that Bret was sticking around? Because this was promoted as if we were going to hear Bret's decision. Now, as an adult fan, I could say, well, obviously he's staying or they wouldn't put him on TV. But as a kid, I thought maybe they're going to give him a moment to say goodbye to the fans. We know that's not how it wound up being. You can even see a pensive shot of Vince McMahon sitting at ringside. He was the commentator in that era. And he seems so relieved when Bret announces that he's signing a contract and he's staying with the WWE forever. It was a 20-year deal, but what do you guys remember in the locker room about this moment?
Yeah, I don't remember if we knew beforehand that Bret was going to say this. I don't want to tell you something that is not true. I think we thought, to my recollection, we knew he's going to resign with WWE, to my recollection. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that. It's been 25 years or more, whatever it's been, or good Lord, it's been longer than that. It's been almost 30 years. So maybe I'm wrong about that, but I remember this wasn't a huge surprise. We thought Brett was going to resign. Brett was very loyal to WWE, and WWE is very loyal to Brett, and he was our main guy. He and Taker were our main two guys. And so I don't think anybody really thought that he was leaving. I think everybody thought that Brett was going to resign. Brett was WWE through and through. And so I don't think there was any really thought about Brett was going to go somewhere else.
So we know that ultimately he does stick around, but it's a 20-year contract. Does the locker room ever hear that piece of information that it's supposed to be a 20-year deal? Because that feels like unprecedented in wrestling.
Yeah. I remember, when I'm going over the notes for this show, I remember back in the day, I don't remember when I first heard about it, but I did hear that this was a 20-year deal. Yeah. That this was a long-term deal, and it wasn't all involved with just wrestling, involved being an agent, involved being with the company. And, I thought it made sense to us. Conrad, we weren't making a lot of money at the time. And so if a guy he's our top guy, he and Taker, if you sign this guy to a long-term contract, that's good for us. We don't want the guy to go. He's one of the guys drawing, the crowds that we have, even though crowds weren't huge. Without Brett, we just don't have a marquee name. Taker and a couple of the guys, but Brett's one of the big parts of WWE. So the guys, to my recollection, were all pretty happy that Brett had resigned because it gives us some stability.
Are people talking about the money? I mean, I know that you've told us before that was something you never asked about. You never wanted to go down that road, but I'm sure there was somebody in the locker room who was, hey, so-and-so's getting such and such. As the story goes, he is doing a 20-year deal. The idea being he would have 3 years as a wrestler, reportedly $1.5 million per year. And then he would serve for 7 years as almost like a Pat Patterson style advisor to Vince. And then another decade, 10 years as like the Babe Ruth of the WWF. So almost an ambassador, if you will. When you hear it's a 20-year deal, are there people griping about that? And then when you hear the amount, allegedly 1.5 million, that's got to be a huge increase from most everyone in the locker room at that point. Does it spin up jealousy or how is that received?
It ain't an increase, Conrad. It's freaking in a different universe than what we were making. I mean, good grief. It wasn't even close to what we were making. I've said it before when I was making, and the only salary I'll mention is the first year, because I've said it a few times. I made $77,000 my first year in WWE, and I was on every single pay-per-view to my knowledge, and every single house show. So, after you pay taxes and pay your rent and stuff, I mean, $77,000 in 95 and 96 seems like a lot, but not when you're on the road 250 days a year. It's really not that much. So I don't know what anybody else was making. I only, you tell me what Brett was making, I certainly take your word for it. And that's what I heard, elsewhere. And that's what I heard back then. That it's not like it's an increase from what some of us were making. It was a different universe from what some of us were making. And that was fine with me. I had no problem with it. I thought Brett deserved it. I thought Brett earned it. And what I liked about it was if Brett could make it, if I get lucky enough to make it to the top, then I can make that too. I don't know anybody begrudged him for making that. We just saw it as opportunity. If Brett can make that, then if we make it to that spot, we can make that as well.
Hypothetically, how do you think guys like Shawn and The Undertaker would feel about that? I mean, they've been carrying the mantle while he had been on a long absence. While he's out, because this is important, he's going to peace out at the end of WrestleMania 12. So that's late March. We know 2 months later is when Scott Hall shows up on Nitro. And then, in July, so 3 months after he's been gone, that's when Hogan turns heel. The whole world changes. And you see all this momentum now with WCW through July, August, September. Now here he is in October. Clearly this is perfect timing for Brett to get a big contract from Vince. I can't help but think if Brett had tried to negotiate this deal for himself just a handful of months earlier, let's say if he would have tried to get this pitch across the goal line before WrestleMania 12, hey, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to take a break. I'm going to keep, I'm going to ride this thing till the wheels fall off, and I'll stay with you 20 years. I don't know that he gets 1.5 out of Brett or out of Vince around WrestleMania 12. I think the NWO had to get hot in order for there to be leverage on Brett's side. Am I off base, or does that make sense?
No, 100%. NWO changed the world. I mean, absolutely changed the world. They changed everything. They got guaranteed contracts into the equation. They got big money contracts into the equation. That wasn't there before. And there's no way that Vince gives a guaranteed contract, in my opinion, before the NWO comes along. When the NWO comes along and Scott and Kevin changed the world, along with Eric, I mean, it made everything different in the monetary payouts different in the wrestling business. You know, when I went after the Montreal Screwjob 2 days later, I went to Japan. I never intended on coming back. I just always thought I'd stay in Japan. I figured I'd finish my career over there. The world changed during this time because of the NWO, Scott and Kevin and Eric. And when I came back, now all of a sudden they want to sign guys to guaranteed contracts. That wasn't even on the table before the Montreal Screwjob and before Scott and Kevin and Eric came along.
So let's think about that. If Brett had tried to speak to both sides, and as the story goes, he did have conversations with Eric Bischoff, and I think Brett even gifted Eric a book about, you know, Western culture and heritage and things like that, because they both were, you know, half-assed cowboys in their mind. Roll Tide on that. But I do wonder, what would that have looked like if Bret Hart shows up in the fall of '96 and he is joining the NWO? What's that look like for the WWF at that point?
If Bret joins the WCW in fall of '96
and joins the NWO, so it's Hogan, Hall, Nash, Waltman, and Bret Hart. Like, it really is the New York contingent here invading Atlanta. And no disrespect, but you've still got Shawn Michaels and you've got The Undertaker, but those are really the only established stars. Yeah. Steve Austin's starting to warm up, but let's be honest, he needs the rub from Bret Hart to get there. I think even Steve would say that Bret sort of helped bring him up. That would have just been absolutely disastrous for the WWF, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it would have been. I think the main thing, and it's like Lanza told me when I was so worried about Bret leaving, everybody else leaving, said, as long as that guy, and he pointed to Vince, he goes, as long as that guy's in that chair, we're fine. And I felt a lot easier about it then. I still was pretty nervous about it. We still had Vince, and we still had Kevin Dunn and the best production in the world. But we didn't have the benefit of Mr. McMahon, which the Montreal Screwjob created, which is one of the greatest heel characters in history. Mr. McMahon and Stone Cold. And we didn't have Bret making Steve at WrestleMania if all this happened. So, yeah, I think it's an absolute disaster for WWE. I don't know how it ends up. We still had a lot of chips. We had a lot of chips because we had the better production, and we had Vince. And, you know, that's it may have taken us a while. I think we'd have been okay. But, boy, that changes the world if that happens.
It's fascinating to think, what if, you know, I think a lot of people have spent time thinking about what if Shawn had come down and joined the NWO, but what if Bret did? Man, it would have been wild. I do want to talk a little bit about Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. I can't believe this is another anniversary this week. Later this week will be their actual wedding anniversary. I'm talking about the real life Paul Levesque and the real life Stephanie McMahon. They got married at a private ceremony in Connecticut, and the wrestling world was forever changed. And it happened 22 years ago this week. We've seen them on TV and heard them referred to as the Authority. But this is something that a lot of people were probably cautious about. Like, if you're Triple H or you're one of his friends, you probably hear the phrase, hey, what if this doesn't work out? What if this doesn't go well? That could be the end of your wrestling career. Did you feel like it was a risk to date the boss's daughter? And ultimately, hey, it worked out. They got married and had a bunch of kids, and it's a happily ever after story. But that was a risk, was it not?
Yeah, of course it's a risk. Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's not the one bridge in town at that point, but the boss owns the wrestling company, that you work for. Yeah, that's always a tough situation. And, you got to hope you're right. But when you fall in love, you fall in love. And you're willing to take whatever happens. And it worked out great for those guys. It was it a risk? Yeah. Vince didn't want Stephanie, from what I understand, to marry one of the boys. And then she fell in love with Hunter, and Vince loved Hunter as well. certainly gave his blessing to it. But is it a risk? Yeah, absolutely. If that goes sideways, if that goes sideways in 2000, I don't know where, that ends up.
It is something I want to ask you about. Like when it first comes out that, Hunter is no longer with China and he was dating, I don't mean this ugly, but one of the boys. He's dating one of the locker room. I know it's one of the girls, but that's not the phrase we use. But now he's going to be dating the boss's daughter. Do you think he took a lot of shit about that in the beginning, or was everybody like, let's see how this works out?
No. People are pretty much, wrestlers are the ultimate libertarians. We don't give a shit what people do, what people, who they fall in love with or who they want to marry. It was the boss's daughter, but she was young too, and, she's dating one of the boys. So, she's dating one of the boys and he's dating the boss's daughter, so it's not like, one is crossing a line that the other one isn't. And we didn't care. I don't remember anybody thinking that this was something untoward, that this was something that shouldn't happen. She was young, he was young. They're both very smart people. Once they got together, it kind of seemed like a natural fit once they got together. So I don't remember anybody in the locker room saying, oh, but what the hell is he doing or what's she doing or anything like that. It was just, two people in love and a bunch of the guys who really just kind of want to get to the next town and see how late the bar stays open.
What we've heard from a lot of guys through the years, it should be worth mentioning, is, and I know it's sour grapes, but there's a lot of people who are, for whatever reason, anti-WWE, and you would hear them say things like, oh, he's only in that position because he married the boss's daughter. Like they always want to discredit and take away anyone's success, and there's always got to be a reason why someone else is more successful than they are. It's just negative, below the line thinking. But it's hard for me to imagine that you never heard any of that in the locker room ever.
No, not as far as he's only doing this because it's the boss's daughter. I mean, no, I'm telling you, wrestlers don't give a shit what people do. Right. There are people out there that the fans wanted to make something big of it. I don't remember any of the guys, thinking. Now we would joke like, "Don't better not screw up." You better not screw up,
right?
We'd joke like that with about it. It wasn't like, "Hey man, you're doing this to make a political move." Nobody. I don't think anybody thought that. I don't know if they did or not, and I don't think anybody cared. Just Hunter didn't care about who we're marrying. It's like I'm sure he thought hey, I hope you're happy. We are hoping that he was happy. He's a nice guy. Stephanie's a nice lady. I think people just kind of thought, we hope you're happy. And, and people are going to say, oh, you're just sticking up for WWE. No, I'm not. I mean, I'm telling you, wrestlers are the biggest libertarians in the world. We don't care if people are white, black, brown, who they love, who they marry, what their religion is. Wrestlers don't care. They really don't. There's a few out there that are obviously bad apples that have different viewpoints, but for the most part, guys don't care. We're just worried about our own stuff and hoping everybody else gets along fine.
Well, I've always thought it was interesting to look back at that time, because one of the things I don't think people think about with the benefit of hindsight is that Vince made sure to book himself wrestling Stephanie in a street fight the weekend before their wedding.
Of course he did.
So you've got father versus daughter in an I Quit like street fight type match where we're going to use weapons and beat the shit out of each other. And then 1 week later, we're going to hope that she looks good as new in her wedding photos. This has to be something Linda could not have been thrilled with.
Not before I got married. My first time, I had a loser leaves town match with the Freebirds. And Michael Hayes and Bam Bam, and oh my God, they spent the whole match trying to bust me open so my pictures would be ruined the next day at my wedding. The sons of bitches. It was supposed to be the weekend before, and it got moved up because of TV. And I'm going to go work for Otto for the next 6 months. So I'm going to lose a loser leaves town match for 6 months at the Sportatorium with the Freebirds in a Freebird street fight match. And Michael and Bam Bam spent the whole freaking night trying to bust me open. They finally got me. So my pictures will be ruined at my church.
My gosh. So I got to ask, were you at this wedding?
Yes, I was.
Tell me your favorite wedding story, and I bet it involved.
Wait, you know what my favorite wrestling story was, and I haven't even told you. You know what it is. You know exactly what it is.
It's got to be something about baby's got her blue jeans on or something like that.
It's freaking Michael Hayes.
Yeah.
Of course it was. There he is. I love Michael. Michael is, listen, Michael is probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. And when I say smart, he's genius level. So when you talk with all these wrestling guys and always talk about there's one guy that always talks, there's one guy above all of them, and that's Michael Hayes. This guy is a freaking savant. Otherwise, he'd been fired 30 years ago. So we're downstairs, and Michael gets up and sings like a song or something, and he does like a really good job. And he sits down. We go, well, that sucked. So we help him with, just maybe a little whiskey, maybe not. The boss may have been involved in this too. And then he gets back up. And this time he turns into the Freebird. And at one point, Kurt Angle goes up to get the microphone from him because Michael's so far past over the line that you can't even see the line where he is looking backwards. You can't even see it. He's so far over the line. Kurt Angle goes up and tries to take the microphone from him. Michael goes, "Who the fuck have you beat?" Well, the whole world. Literally the whole world. He literally beat the whole world. So he didn't have time to mention everybody he had beaten. He kind of just wanted the microphone from him. So now he was singing, and then he was making this very obscene, not obscene, but just very colorful, a lot of colorful language toast to Stephanie and Hunter. And Kurt Angle realizes that he probably needs to take the microphone from him. And he tries to, and Michael is not going to give it to him without a fight. And Kurt doesn't want to fight him. He's a free bird. And so then he turns around, but when he does, Linda grabs the microphone from Michael. And Michael's like the little kid, and goes and sits down. And then we were very happy because he free-birded.
Is Michael Hayes the gift that keeps on giving? It sure feels like it.
Yes. When you talk about buried alive, they could have used Michael's grave because he apparently died probably 30 years ago. He just won't show up at the cemetery. He's just too stubborn. He's moonwalking all over his own grave. Michael is the gift that Michael is the God. He the stuff he's done or tried to do. You'd be in prison. It's insane. He's crazy. And by the way, the nicest guy in the world. I'll stick up for Michael every day of the week and fucking 4 times on Sunday. I love Michael.
Me too.
He is batshit crazy.
I've had a blast with him. I've never hung out with Michael Hayes and not left with a story and not left with a smile on my face and not enjoyed myself with him. And if and when he ever gets tired of helping behind the scenes in WWE and being on the road, can you imagine how wild a Michael Hayes podcast would be?
Holy shit. It's unbelievable. He told us on one of our podcasts, when he was one of the first guests we had on. I love Michael. Michael has done a lot for me. I love Michael. Michael's telling a story about being down in Lake Charles, I think it was. He said, I was moonwalking in the bar, and Jimmy Garvin didn't tell me that I was about to moonwalk in one of those big fans. He goes, the fan hit me in the head, and next thing you know, I woke up naked in bed with Jimmy Garvin. And I said, Michael, you probably need to explain some of this to us. He goes, well, that's what happened. I don't doubt it. Don't doubt it whatsoever. So, yeah, Michael he's great. He's crazy. Nicest guy in the world.
Well, I can
tell some more stories, but I can't tell them on fucking air. I called her and say, Michael, do you know so-and-so? Oh, yeah, I asked him about the time. I go, Michael, I don't think I can ask him that. That's one thing I don't think I can fucking ask him.
I'm excited to
lost money on a death pool on Michael Hayes.
And Jake Roberts. And
I'm telling you. And Jake's like see him now. He's like happy as he can be. He's got a beautiful wife. He shows up. This is quite remarkable.
Wait, who has a beautiful wife?
Jake Roberts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you were saying Michael Hayes, and I'm like, wait a minute now. I'm married to the business speech about a dozen times, so I didn't think you were talking about Hayes.
His wife was part of the Doral golf tournament that helped us when he drove the golf cart in the lake.
Michael Hayes drove a golf cart in the lake?
Yeah.
Have you told me that story before?
I don't know.
I got to hear this. Michael Hayes.
So we're at the Doral golf tournament, and Michael Hayes is there with his wife, And we're sitting there, and this was Buster Douglas was there. Like Jermaine Jackson was there. Sergeant Slaughter put it on. It was huge, man. We didn't have any money. So we were like down there, and it was awesome. We're sitting at the Drow, this famous golf course, all these great people. They thought we were rich too, but we didn't have any money. We weren't making any money. We're just on TV all the time. So we're down there. So it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, and Michael gets up and goes to the bathroom. And I asked his wife, I said, hey, are you right beside me in room 148? She goes, no, we're in 232. I said, okay. Well, anyway, now I got his room number. So when the bill comes, I sat there and I'm like Elon Musk. I mean, I go, I got it. Give her. So I don't have the money for this bill, man. This thing, it's outrageous. I can't remember what it was. It was huge. I said, I got it. Taker sitting there. Taker says, hey, John, let me get that. I go, no, I got it. I'm a big shot. I'm big shot. I got Michael's room number. So I said, I got it. I go, what's 20% of 1,500? And I'm just like Taker's like, John, please let me pay for this. And no, I got it. So I'm leave this huge tip on it, later sign it to Michael's room. So get up to leave, and Taker pulls me aside. He goes, John, I'm not trying to embarrass you. He goes, but please. He goes, I'm doing okay, and I know you're new with the company. He goes, why don't you let me pay for it? I go, no, I got it. No big deal. And he goes, let me pay half of it. I said, I signed it to Michael's room. And he goes, oh my God. He goes, that's the greatest thing I ever heard. So Michael, we're about to tee off like an hour and a half later, and Michael is driving up in his golf cart, and he's flying. He's hurt. Now he's found out that I charged this bill to his room. And we're gonna pay for it. We're not gonna tell him. No, Michael's coming up, and all these guys are like sitting there. They don't know we've been up all night. We're just like waiting to tee off. Like an hour later, we haven't gone to bed. Michael comes up, and he's gonna drive up on the tee, which you're not supposed to do, and he's gonna stop. And I think he's gonna get out and punch me. So I'm like sitting there watching. Going, oh, he is mad. His hair's all out. Got his Zubaz on, and he's cutting a promo. You think you got more? I got more shower time. You got ring time. You greenhorn rookie. You want to fuck with the Freebird? Don't nobody mess with Freebird. Bradshaw. I'm like, oh my God. I'm gonna have to fight Michael now. This is a disaster. Like all these people are here. Michael comes up and he's flying his golf cart, and he comes up on the tee and he hits the brakes right in front of me, and there's dew on the ground, and he slides right over the tee, right down the hill, and right into the lake. Yeah, he sinks a golf cart in the lake. And as he's going down, like, fuck you, Bradshaw. He's going down with the ship.
Only on Something to Wrestle. Remind everybody again whose show this really is, John.
Well, it ain't that other. It ain't this guy's. I'm telling you, it's not this guy here. It's not. I love you. 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 No, it's not. It's my show. JBL Bradshaw. Bradshaw 316 says, I just stole your fucking podcast.
I love it. Let's do it. Let's talk about what else happened 18 years ago this week. The UFC announced that they had signed Brock Lesnar. Man, it doesn't feel like that was nearly 20 years ago. We had seen what he could do in NCAA amateur wrestling. We had seen what he could do in the confines of sports entertainment, becoming the youngest WWE champion of all time. But now he's going to throw his hat in the ring into the UFC. We know he had tried out for the Vikings and somehow, some way, despite never actually playing football, made the practice squad and made it to the last round of cuts. But hey, then he goes and tries his hand at MMA and has one initial okay showing, I believe, with K1 in Los Angeles. But now he's going to the big time. He's going to be fighting in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And it was on this day in 2007 at the UFC 77 pay-per-view, which had Anderson Silva against Rich Franklin. What a lopsided beating that was, where we announced the signing of Brock Lesnar. John, when you hear that one of your guys, a WWE superstar, is now going to try his hand at the UFC, what'd you think?
I loved it so much. Me and Taker flew out to his first fight. Yeah, we were there. We were there ringside for his first fight with Frank Mir. Which unfortunately, he got caught in a leg bar, and he made up for it in the next fight. And, pretty lopsided fight. The second one, he just made a mistake. The first UFC, fight with a real good submission guy. But yeah, I loved it so much. We flew out there just to watch him and support him. look, I loved what he was doing. I thought he was great. I thought he had an incredible chance because we knew that one of the reasons, talking to a lot of guys, you talk to a lot of these amateur wrestlers, they talk to a lot of the shooter guys that come around, the UFC guys, that kind of the same type business, even though theirs is legit and ours is not. But we share, crowds, we share arenas. A lot of guys in WWE were big fans of UFC, so you got to talk to a lot of these guys. Brock was a national champion just because he was so freaking big and strong. He just beat people up. So we knew he had a great chance of being a UFC champion, and we were certainly hoping that he would be. And he did it and made a huge name for himself. And that tells you something about guys that leave the business and make a name for themselves and come back. If you leave the business and don't make a name for yourself, it's one thing. Brock became the biggest draw in, I guess, the history of probably UFC, at least at the time, and of WWE, at least at the time. And beat the legend Frank Couture. Man, what a freaking fight that was.
I was at that Couture fight. Couldn't wait to be there. I couldn't believe he was getting a shot. I'm glad he was getting a shot. I mean, Brock really broke a lot of records and paved a lot of ground. And I know these days he's not well liked in certain wrestling fandom circles, but his debut fight with the UFC had over 500,000 buys. And just like that, the UFC was in the Brock Lesnar business.
Yeah.
And I know that he was a force in amateur wrestling, and I know he had a really incredible run with really great matches with Eddie Guerrero. But I think I would argue that, respectfully, Brock Lesnar was not really a draw until after he went through the UFC. But on the other side of this UFC run, he is a megastar.
Yeah.
And I think it was the ability to, well, there's just not another human walking around like Brock Lesnar. And once he could show what he could really do, not just from storytelling, like we've seen him do that in WWE, but I mean, just being a legit badass motherfucker. When the world saw that, they were like, oh, I got to see this guy. And I feel like his UFC stuff, not only did that make him a bunch of money in mixed martial arts, but the contracts he got on the other side of that for wrestling were out of this world. And it's because of his UFC success, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There was one point where he was about to come back to WWE and it wasn't sure about the contract. Brock's a great negotiator, man. And he went out to a Vegas pay-per-view, really pissed Vince off that he went out there, but it's a negotiation. And Brock got what he wanted. And Brock's a brilliant negotiator. And, Brock is what I tell people all the time. Don't ruin yourself on social media. Don't ruin yourself in the post-fight press conference. Brock was Brock everywhere he was. And he made a name just as much for himself afterwards. I mean, some of the stuff he said, some of the stuff he did, I mean, people wanted to see him. And he made a name for himself. And I agree with you. If he doesn't go to UFC, Vince thought, he was on the cover of the wrestling game, the video game. He was on the cover. He was going to be in WrestleMania, huge. Vince thought he was going to be the guy. And he would have been. I think he became much bigger. I don't see how anybody could say anything different after he went to the UFC and became champion.
For us hardcore MMA junkies at the time, there was a narrative out there on the message boards and things like that from Brock's camp. They would claim that he had a no punching in the face rule for sparring. And I kind of don't buy that because people would say, oh, well, he doesn't like getting punched in the face. And I would say to myself, who the hell likes getting punched in the face, John?
Right. About these guys. These guys can knock out a horse.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like, say, oh, it's hard. It doesn't like getting hit. Who does like getting hit by freaking Alistair Overeem? I mean, the guy could knock out a freaking cattle. I mean, it's not like there's nothing pleasant about that. I don't know why anybody would say, oh, he loves getting hit in the face. I don't know anybody that would say that, even your best boxers.
Well,
and the thing is, if you're gonna fight a wrestler, you box a wrestler, you wrestle a boxer. It's the old mindset about styles make matchups. Mm-hmm. And it's how do you handle somebody? Famously, when they would have guys, like in Europe that would come out of the crowd, and it never happened when I was there, but it happened before I got there. They would pre-interview the guy. That's something they did in the old carnies. Say, well, why do you think you can beat this guy? Oh, because I'm a great wrestler. That tells the guy out there, don't wrestle the wrestler. Punch this guy. Or, oh, I'm a great boxer. Okay, you're not going to box him. You're going to wrestle him. It's just you got to take what's an advantage to you. And when you're Alistair Overeem and you can punch a hole through a brick wall, that's your advantage.
Hypothetically, if Brock had not gotten diverticulitis and had the major intestinal surgery, obviously that's going to rob him of a lot of his future athletic potential in MMA. Had that not happened, do you think we would have enjoyed this incredible Brock Lesnar sports entertainment run, or would he have stuck with that?
I don't know. Brock likes the money. And he's not beholden to titles and things like that. I don't think he really cares. So would he have fought more? Yeah, he would have fought more. He might have done both. He might have done both at an incredibly high level that certainly would have never been heard of. And so I think you'd have seen some incredible stuff out of Brock if he hadn't had this diverticulitis, that could have killed him.
Well, it's interesting to think, what if we know that Brock Lesnar is back in WWE right now? And speaking of WWE, we didn't even have this on our docket to discuss, but I do think we should mention it, that, hey, all of a sudden Seth Rollins is without the world title. It looks like he's going to be out for a while. He's going to be having surgery, and they're going to be looking to figure out what's next for Seth. I think we're all hoping that he has a speedy recovery. He's been on an absolute tear. It feels like the worst possible timing. Yeah. But we found out on Monday Night Raw last night, which we didn't know, or we wouldn't have known had we been able to do the show yesterday, that they took the belt off of him. And so CM Punk is now going to have a title shot against the fellow who won his shot last night on Monday Night Raw, Jey Uso. What do you expect to happen here on Saturday night's main event? Is it Uso's time, or is CM Punk getting another bite at the apple? Of course, he was supposed to be champion if it weren't for the ruse of the century and Seth Rollins cashing in and stealing that opportunity. If you were a betting man, and I know you are, would you put the smart money on Punk or Uso?
I think on Punk. With crisis comes ladders. And anytime there's a crisis, somebody steps in. Voids are always filled. And, you have a void here left, a huge void left by Seth. Somebody's going to fill that void. And I think Jey or CM Punk can fill that very, very easily, very, very well. Not easily. Nobody can fill a spot of Seth Rollins easily, but he can fill it very well. I think it's CM Punk. Don't know. I like them both. I've always been a fan of both of Rikishi's kids. And, but I'm a fan of CM Punk too. I think putting money on it, CM Punk.
Well, I don't know if I would buy that. I don't know. Maybe we will. It feels like there's more story coming. Maybe they use it to set up Survivor Series. We'll see. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the coming weeks, but something I'm excited to talk about right now, and it's one of my favorite segments we've been doing with you, John. It's the top 5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's time to count down the top 5. Brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
And today's episode of Top 5 is going to be JBL's top 5 most underrated big men. This is a topic that a lot of people have talked about for a long time. Who are the best big men? We're going to get to the bottom of it right now. Coming in at number 5, you've got a tie here. Vader and Mark Henry. And you wrote 2 absolute monsters who don't get the full credit they deserve. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we're not talking about giants here. So we're taking out Big Show. We're talking about Andre. We're taking out Giant Baba. So we're taking out the giants that come along. We're talking about just what we'd call the big men. And I think these are 2 of the best, certainly of all time. Certainly that's why they're in the top 5. Vader was unbelievable how good he was. The matches he had with Sting in the early 90s were just incredible. The matches he had in Japan. Vader was just different. Brad Rheingans trained me and trained Leon also. And when Leon came there to Brad said, "What can you do that's impressive?" Leon walked around his dojo there on his hands. Literally, this 400-pound man was walking around on his hands. I mean, Vader was an incredible athlete. He's a former top draft pick in the NFL. Vader was an unbelievable great big man. By the time he got to WWE, he wasn't the same. He had lost a bit of a step. He wished WWE had got him in the early 90s. Mark Henry's the same. I mean, there's people, that will tell you that Mark Henry, and I'm in this camp, that Mark Henry could be the strongest man of all time, literally of all time. Stronger than Louis Sears, stronger than Kazmaier, stronger than every single person that ever has walked on this planet. And Mark, it took him a little while to get it, but when he got it, Mark was fantastic. I mean, I remember Mark and I joke about it. We were working with Mark and D'Lo on the road, and Lanza told us, he goes, hey, they really want to use Mark, so could you guys, help get him in shape? So we're keeping him in there, just kind of running, doing stuff. And I went to run his head in the stairs. I didn't know Mark hadn't done it. Mark hadn't really been trained that much. Ran his own head in the stairs, busted himself open, and it's bloody and all laid down. I come back in. Ron said, what happened to Mark? I said, I think he's dead. He goes, better get D'Lo in. So that was Mark. Mark has such a good attitude. He really did. And there was, he had a little bit of an adjustment when he first came in, and once he did, went up to Canada, worked with the Hearts, and Mark became a terrific big man. I mean, Vader and Mark Henry were two of the greatest big men of all time.
There's no doubt these are incredible in-ring performers with a huge legacy. I have to admit, I didn't get to spend a lot of time in real life with Vader, but Mark Henry is terrific. I have a great time with him every time. I don't know how you could see Mark Henry and not just smile. He always has a smile on his face. One of the nicest guys you could meet in wrestling. But Vader is a real guilty pleasure of mine. He's got to be on everybody's top 5 list. Coming in at your number 4 on JBL's top 5 most underrated big men, Bruiser Brody. And this is not a name that's all that well known to younger fans, but man, if you watch old tape on this guy, and that's the only way I got to enjoy him, he was something else. Tell us why Brody comes in at number 4, John.
Yeah, Brody was just constant action. He and Stan were, what a great team they were, but Brody was just a solid action. And Brody was a big guy, smart guy. He's a former staff writer at the Fort Worth Star Telegram, I believe it was. He was a sports writer, and Brody was a very cerebral guy, very smart guy. He built this character himself. I mean, this was an orchestrated character. People say, oh, Brody's just crazy and all this stuff. No, Brody orchestrated this character, much like Abdullah came along and said, I'm going to build this character that's crazier than most. Brody built this frenetic character that never stopped. That was, people thought was crazy. People thought was wild. And it may have been, it may have been more crazy than what Brody would care to admit. But man, Brody was, he was just a terrific talent.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And you want to talk about an innovator and an influencer. I mean, how many guys have patterned part of their presentation after Bruiser Brody?
Yeah, a lot of have, and all of them have fallen short, by the way, not even close. Brody was a terrific worker, and he could move. I mean, Brody was a great athlete. A lot of guys just kind of get the hair like him, the beard like him, and think they can move their eyes like him. Brody had the whole package. I mean, Brody was a guy that could go with anybody. He was a very tough guy, for one, but 2, he could go. Brody was a huge, big man. And most people that have, tried to emulate Brody just kind of have hair like him and beard like him and eyes like him, but they forget that everything from the shoulders down, Brody was a freaking stud. And these guys who've tried to imitate him, not a very good job.
Coming in at number 3 on JBL's top 5 list of most underrated big men. No surprise here. Stan Hansen comes in at number 3 on the list. And I've heard you quoted once as saying, Stan Hansen didn't work stiff. The world just wasn't tough enough to handle him. What a great quote that is.
That's exactly right. And Stan didn't care getting hit back. Brody didn't either. When you work like that, the problem is if you don't like to get hit back. Stan didn't care. Stan didn't care getting hit. He didn't matter. He and Brody, when they came out, I mean, look at this guy, man. When they came out, you had to see it in person to believe it. I mean, there's nothing like sitting in Budokan and seeing Stan come out romping and stomping and realizing he's coming after you. But seeing it in person, it was unbelievable. Never got to see Brody in person, but I'd love to have. But you see the tapes of it. It's very similar. He and Stan, man, one of the greatest tag teams, if not the greatest of all time, if they had stayed together. But they were so valuable as singles wrestlers, they couldn't leave them together. And plus, Brody was constantly negotiating and going to different territories. But to see Stan come out and that entrance explode and Stan freaking that cowbell all over the freaking place, beating people up, man, there was nothing like it, man. These guys lit up arenas and they drew a ton of money. That's why they're in the top 5 for me.
Unbelievable list so far, but coming in at number 2 is going to be a somewhat controversial pick with some of our listeners. You've got on number 2 on your underrated list of great big men, Kane. Why does Kane come in at number 2 here?
Because he deserves to be number 2, in my opinion. I mean, there's nothing that Glenn can't do. Glenn, obviously, you've found out, all kinds of things about him. He's a very smart guy, but Glenn's incredibly talented. Glenn could do anything. I mean, Glenn could do comedy. He did it very well. The stuff he did with Daniel Bryan was fantastic. He could do hardcore stuff. He could also wrestle. I mean, Glenn carried a lot of matches for a 10, 15-year period on top in WWE. That was just remarkable. I don't know anybody else that can have that run. I heard a Undertaker doing a podcast said, what would you build one territory on? And he said, I'd build it on Glenn Jacobs. And I agree with that. I think Glenn is that freaking good. Glenn's a guy you want in a locker room, but Glenn is a guy you want performing on your card.
I got to admit, it's hard for me to wrap my head around underrated. Like, I feel like he should be in every wrestling Hall of Fame for all the reasons you listed. I mean, the longevity, the perseverance, the ability to make it work as a single, as a tag, as a baby, as a heel, with a mask, without a mask, serious, comedy, everywhere in between. Feels like he did it all, but maybe you're right. Maybe some of his political affiliations does make him underrated, because it does feel like he's excluded from some of those conversations. But when I think of big man Kane, when it comes to WWE, he's got to be near the top of the list.
Yeah, I think so. And I think not just the political affiliations, but seeing him without the gimmick on, seeing him, talking, he's a very cerebral guy. Glenn's a very smart guy. He's very much a student of history, especially economic history. He can lecture you on Keynesian models and all kinds of crazy things, that smart people are able to lecture people on. So when you see that, it takes you away from this monster that he was, this character that he played. And I think that is a lot of things has hurt his legacy, not necessarily his views, but the fact that you see him and you think, okay, you more associate him with this guy who's just a really smart guy than this monster that was out there that was just incredible big guy. Fortunately for the world, they're both.
Coming in at number 1 on JBL's top 5 list of the most underrated big man, The Undertaker. Oh, you got some explaining to do here. Who the hell is underrating The Undertaker? How's he come in at number 1?
But you talk about the greatest big men of all time. He's not on everybody's list. It's crazy to me. He's 6'8", 6'10", whatever he is. He's 320, 330 pounds when he's at his peak. And you sit there and look at it, and then people want to bring up all kinds of different guys ahead of Undertaker. I don't think there's anybody in the history of the business, especially when you're talking about big men, that belong ahead of Undertaker. I mean, he's done absolutely everything. He was the guy that got guys through matches. He was the guy who had put out there with shitty gimmicks that couldn't get over. He said, oh, Taker can do it. He was the guy who had to be a barometer for guys who come in the 90s, see if this guy can work or not. He got put out there with them. But then he also was expected to draw crowds, and he did it everywhere he's been. Mr. WrestleMania, the streak, there's so much about him. He's still, this day, when he walks out there, people go nuts. The greatest big man in the history of the business.
Well, there you go. There's JBL's top 5 greatest big men or most underrated big men. We want to hear from you in the comments. Who do you think should be in the top 5 of most underrated big men? Who are your top 5 most underrated big men? Let us know in the comments. And I did want to run through some honorable mentions, John. You always want to make sure everybody gets their flowers. Otto Wanz gets on your list. He's the Austrian powerhouse, and he brought a lot of credibility to European wrestling. But why is he an honorable mention?
Hey, Otto used to, they told me he had the world record for breaking phone books in half. I don't know if that's true or not, but I saw Otto just rip these massive phone books in half. Otto was a super tough guy, but let me tell you how over Otto was. So we were going down to, I believe, Ljubljana. We're going from Vienna, I believe it was, not Graz. We were going from Vienna, I think. Maybe we've been going from Graz down to, I think it's Slovenia, the former Yugoslavia. Just south of that was Croatia, where the war was still going all the time. Otto forgot his passport. So Otto's going basically toward a war zone. He calls up ahead. He goes, "This is Otto Vaughn's. I forgot my passport." They're going, "Oh, Otto, it'd be great to see you." Otto got into another country without his passport. He was so freaking over. He got down there. Everybody wanted to take pictures with him. He came back through from the other side. Same thing. He's like, "Oh, my God, it's Otto." He goes, "I don't have my passport." Like, "Oh, don't worry about it, Otto. It's not a big deal." Otto grew up with Arnold Schwarzenegger in Graz. Arnold was, except for Arnold, the biggest star in Austria. I don't think it's even close. I mean, Otto drew huge crowds. He became AWA champion. That was kind of more like, similar to how Baba got it from Jack Briscoe for a while. Just kind of wanted to be champion for a while, a little favor. But Otto was a massive draw in Europe and a terrific big man. He called a spot one time to Vader, "Break my nose." That was the spot he called, and Vader broke his nose. Otto was a tough guy, but man, he was over like crazy.
Break my nose is the greatest to call in the history of wrestling.
Yeah, he told Vader, "Break my nose," and Vader just open hand palm struck him right in the nose. It's all on tape.
Let's talk about Don Leo Jonathan. Decades ahead of his time is what you wrote. I'll admit, I need to learn some more. Drop some knowledge on me here, John.
Yeah, the giant Mormon. His second generation. His dad was a brother Jonathan, I believe, or whatever it was. Don Leo Jonathan. Yeah, he was a terrific draw in Canada. He's from Utah, and went up to Canada. One of Andre's favorite guys, but he was a drop kick specialist. He was like 6'10" and whatever he weighed. He was a huge man. He was a bodybuilder and becomes this wrestler. And just would throw drop kick after drop kick. Famous match with him and the Destroyer throwing drop kicks. He used to do it in Japan all the time. I mean, it was unbelievable. Knocked the referee out with a drop kick one time by mistake. Caught him right on the button. A terrific talent, a terrific athlete. But, man, he was a huge draw. Let's talk about giants. He is so overlooked by so many people. But in Canada, especially in Toronto area, that man was a massive draw everywhere he went. A great wrestler and apparently a terrific human being.
Yokozuna, probably no surprise that he is on your honorable mention list. I mean, one of the biggest competitors in the history of WWE. Why does he make your list?
Because he could work. I mean, Yoko could just flat work. I mean, Yoko, I'd sit there watching him in the dressing room rapping. He was a very entertaining guy, just all around. But he could work. And he could have matches with anybody. Taker loved having matches with him because Yoko, especially after he had to deal with Giant Gonzalez, all of a sudden he gets Yoko, a guy that can work. Yoko was a terrific worker, big, tough guy, but he could do anything. Yoko could talk, but they didn't have him talking because he was always in, some character where you had a manager, a mouthpiece talking for him or something. But Yoko was a terrific big guy that could move. Even when he got to 600-700 pounds, he could still move.
Let's talk a little bit about the last one on the last name on your underrated list, and I'm tickled to see it. Kevin Nash makes your honorable mention list. Why do you think so many people are down on Kevin? What do you see that they don't see?
Kevin changed the business. Absolutely changed the business. I mean, this whole business is different because of Kevin. I mean, I don't know how else you could put a guy's legacy in there that's any more important than a guy that would change the business. I mean, when he went to WCW, that's what started the Monday Night Wars. That's what started guaranteed contracts. I mean, everything we have right now, Kevin was a huge part of it. Plus, Kevin was a good worker. People want to bash Kevin for, not being able to work or whatever it is. So I call bullshit on that. Kevin could work, and we were there in 95. We had a great roster. It's hard when you're not drawing to be champion. They had him be champion when you're not drawing. It wasn't because Kevin couldn't draw. We had a great roster that didn't draw. Kevin drew massive ratings in WCW, so it obviously wasn't him. It wasn't any of the guys on our roster either. It was just a bad time in our business. I thought Kevin was great, and he's a very smart guy. I enjoy doing shows with him. I enjoy listening to him. But Kevin changed the business, and that if you can say this person changed the business, then they've got to be on your top list wherever that list is.
Well, there you go. That's John's list of the top 5 most underrated big men. Let us know in the comments below who makes your list of the top 5 most underrated big men in history. Power, presence, respect. These Giants didn't just work. They ruled. Let's talk about something that happened this past weekend in St. Louis. I had an opportunity to sit down with Tony Khan at the radio station, KLIS 590 AM in St. Louis. Shout out to those guys. And, we were talking about St. Louis wrestling history. And I know that he's playing the role of a promoter, and he's going to be there to promote his big pay-per-view that weekend. That's logical. I understand the task at hand. So when I think of St. Louis wrestling, John, like, I'll give you my name, but who do you think of first when you think of St. Louis wrestling?
I think that'd be Harley, wouldn't it?
I think of Harley too. That's exactly right. Anytime I think about wrestling in St. Louis, I always go to Harley. So
Agbar always told me, said Harley was the only guy tough enough to bump in that kill ring. Agbar will put Harley over like $1 million, and Agbar always talked about, when he talked about St. Louis, he talked about Harley.
So I wanted to ask, when you think about St. Louis, you too think of Harley Race. So I lobbed what I felt like was kind of a softball question to Tony and said, hey, when I'm in St. Louis for wrestling, I can't help but think about Harley Race. Who is the Harley Race of your locker room? And he said, John Moxley. And man, the internet got fired up about that. Now, to be clear, at no point were we comparing and saying that Harley Race and John Moxley were the same competitor or whatever. But the real life John Moxley has won a bunch of world champions and championships. And he's, a grizzled veteran. He's a legit bad dude. And, he has this cool, don't F with him persona. He's got the respect of the locker room and his peers. I could see it, but boy, they just got and courted my man, Tony, about this answer. I don't know. Like, I guess maybe I put him in a bad spot. Did I do Tony dirty accidentally?
No, I don't think so. You ask him a question, and what's he going to say? He's got to give you an answer, and he's got to give you an answer out of somebody on his roster. So what's he going to do? He's going to put over one of his boys. So I can understand what Tony's doing. I mean, I don't see the association that close of Harley Race and John Moxley.
No,
Moxley's a great talent. Harley is one of these legendary guys. He goes 60 minutes with Jack Briscoe, or he can do whatever he wants. I mean, Harley was God almighty, man. I saw, Ace still, came out pretty strong about it, and I can understand that. That's a guy that he loves very much in Harley Race, and I'm defending his guy. But I think when you take the context of what it was said, you ask him a question, he had to answer it with somebody from his roster, and he gave you an answer, putting over one of his boys. So I have no issue with it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a silly controversy because, I mean, let's be honest. Who would you compare? Like, if you're going to make a comparison, let's do the WWE answer. Hey, who in the locker room today, who is your Harley Race of the WWE locker room? Almost any name you say, and I'm not asking you to give me a name, but I'm saying almost any name you say now is going to be a headline somewhere. JBL compares so-and-so to Harley Race. And it's like, that's not what he said. Right. That's not the thing. The thing was, hey, who is that guy of your locker room?
Right.
I don't know. It just feels like when I saw that getting some traction, first of all, thank you for the traction. I appreciate it. But secondly, it was like, what? This is the most out of context answer of all time, John.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you put him, he had to give you an answer, somebody from his roster. And so he just came up, he's putting one of his boys over. I have no issue with this whatsoever. I have no issue with
boys, but the guy in the main event. So of course he's going to put over the guy in the main event. Like, duh, that makes sense. I'm here to sell tickets. I'm here to sell pay-per-views. You asked me to make a comparison. I'm going to compare it to the guy that I'm promoting who works in my locker room in the main event tomorrow. Like, what's he supposed to say? What? And I know some people out there want him to look right down the barrel of the camera and say, no one in our locker room is as good as Harley Race. Said no promoter ever. That's not
ever.
how you promote.
Said no promoter ever. There's no promoter ever that would turn that opportunity down to promote their main event. And so I get it. I have no issue with it whatsoever. He's pushing his guy. Good God bless him. That's what promoters do. That's what promoters should do. They stick up for their guys. And no matter what you say on the internet, people are always going to say, "Oh no, Harley Race was this or Harley Race was that or Terry Funk was this or Terry Funk was that." Give me a freaking break. People love acting like they're cerebral by being negative. Nobody says positive things gets the people say they're smart. Oh yeah, I agree with that. That's a great thing. You get bashed for saying that. If you say something negative and you quote something esoteric like, "Oh, you didn't remember back in 1974, he went 63 minutes with Jack Briscoe," and all of a sudden you start quoting these things, and which means absolutely nothing in the context of the question, but it makes you appear smart. And then you get to say something and be snide and derisive and all that, and people get say, "Oh yeah," and you get your 3 likes on social media, and I get to block 3 more people where it's now 67,000 or whatever it is, 134.
It just seems like much ado about nothing. I couldn't help but think, imagine if Vince McMahon was faced with a question like that and call it 1994. So, hey, Vince, Hulk Hogan is now working for WCW. And I know that your attendance figures are down. You must not have any wrestlers as good as Hulk Hogan, right? No, we'll never have another performer quite like Hulk Hogan. We've got Bret Hart and we're doing our best, but Lord bless him. Like, what's he supposed to say? He's supposed to say, "No, man, Hogan's old news. You promote your shit." Like, it's silly to me that we're even having this conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's what promoters do, and you got to promote your boys. And you got to put them over. And if you don't put them over, you're going to have problems from your roster. If you're going, "Oh yeah, you're right." No, you're right. No promoter ever would not answer that question with one of their guys, and especially one of their top guys, to give that guy a big push and a big buzz.
I think it's silly, some of the crazy tribalism and the way it allows everybody to just go into clickbait Jones. And listen, I like Ace Steel. I've never had a bad interaction with him. I was a fan of his work, but I know also too, respectfully, that he's tight with CM Punk. And if someone made the comparison, "Oh, CM Punk is the Harley Race of the WWE locker room," half the internet's going to melt down on that too. Like, there's no way to make that comparison, but we're not saying they're the same person. We're saying, who is that? Who is as close to that in your locker room? Who is filling that role, the role that Harley filled? And of course he's going to sell tickets. I just think to myself, if I'm a St. Louis radio listener and I'm listening to 590 AM KLIS, the Lou information station, cheap plug, and I'm on the fence about, "Oh, there's wrestling in town this week. Okay. Yeah. I want to hear that. Oh, this is the owner of the Jaguars. He owns a wrestling league. Okay. Let's check that out." I'm in St. Louis. I know who the hell Harley Race is. If the guy gets on there and says, "Well, we don't have anyone nearly as good as Harley Race," well, then I don't want to go buy a ticket. I don't want to go see it. What are we doing? Who goes out and says, "I made a special trip to this city to tell you how we're inferior"? Nobody. It's dumb. That's not what people do.
Yeah, and you don't know the context of what Ace was asked either. Ace may have been asked about the comment, and if he does, he stuck up for his guy Harley. And
yeah, he saw the headline, and I get it. But the headline was Tony Khan compares Harley Race to John Moxley. It's like, well, kinda, but not really. It was a promotional interview.
Heaven forbid an internet headline is misleading.
Yeah, well, something that won't be misleading at all is ad-free shows Top Guy Weekend. We had Trevor Murdoch join us live on stage to tell old Harley Race stories. We were thrilled to have him with us. He got emotional telling the story. He showed us his new Harley Race tattoo with Harley's crown and his autograph on his forearm. It was fantastic. I also got a chance to catch up with David Crockett. We told some old stories about Jim Crockett Promotions and certainly Starrcade 1990. That is the dreaded Black Scorpion versus Sting, but it was a Starrcade right there in St. Louis. We caught up with Tony Schiavone and Jeff Jarrett. We had special guests like Eddie Kingston and we even saw Harley Cameron and RJ City and a whole host of others. One of my favorite visits though was with Powerhouse Hobbs. Have you ever met Hobbs? Have you ever talked to him in real life at all, John?
Nope. To my knowledge, no.
His story is like one out of a movie. We heard that story. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, but we've got a very special event coming before you know it. And it's going to happen Royal Rumble weekend. We call it Top Guy Rumble. We've got something special up our sleeve. I want you to make plans to join us. We're going to have game shows with Efren. We're going to have comedy shows just like we did. We'll have wrestling and we'll have a fantasy camp. We've done it before. We're doing it again. Stay tuned. We'll have all the information, but you don't want to miss this opportunity to be a top guy. It's the ultimate weekend for any wrestling fan, and it's exclusive to our top guys at adfreeshows.com. You do not want to miss the Top Guy Rumble. It will be our biggest and best event yet, where you have an opportunity to step in the ring. So go right now to adfreeshows.com, become a top guy, and use our promo code TOPGUY75. We're going to give you 75% off your first month as a top guy. That's a $75 savings right now at adfreeshows.com when you use the promo code TOPGUY75. John, I want to ask you a hypothetical question. I know you don't have a crystal ball, and neither do I, but we're going to just cross our fingers and hope to do our best here. Tanahashi is going to be wrestling his last match at Wrestle Kingdom this January. It's the big Tokyo Dome event, and we know, of course, we're saying that's going to happen under a New Japan banner. But there's more rumor than you can shake a stick at that his opponent will be Shinsuke Nakamura. And I know there's been a hot button word for the last several years about the Forbidden Door, but the idea of a WWE contracted performer wrestling in the Tokyo Dome against Tanahashi in his last match at Wrestle Kingdom feels like the culmination of all Forbidden Doors. We've seen like interviews and sly references made to one another. What do you think? Is there a chance this could actually happen?
Yeah, I think there is. I think the world's different now, and they don't see competition the same as you saw 30 years ago. And so, yeah, I think this could happen. This Nakamura, man, I've got to call a lot of his matches. He is so freaking good, man. It's just one of these things where he's like Jeff Hardy. You can't explain what he does. You just really like it. It's just really good. And that's Nakamura. I mean, when he come down to that music and he's just all over the place, a lot like Jeff Hardy, he just over like crazy and just does things. You couldn't tell a person what he does. You couldn't explain it, but I guess it's just feel to him. But he is a terrific worker. And I don't know if this could happen or not. But I do think there's a good chance.
I think it would be terrific. I hope it does happen. You got to think that New Japan would want it to happen. I, as a wrestling fan, want it to happen. I'd love to see Nakamura and Tanahashi in Tanahashi's last match. And I hope if this happens, maybe it leads to more opportunities like this. We know for sure that Nakamura was allowed to work on Great Muda's last match. That was a Noah project, and I guess they didn't have an official working agreement with AEW, but I don't know, man. It feels like this is becoming more about what's best for the business, what's best for the fans, what's best for the performers. I mean, I think it's a little silly now in 2025 to pretend if you're WWE to think that, well, nobody watches any other wrestling. And if you're AEW or you're New Japan to think that, well, nobody watches WWE. Like, people they know what's out there now, and they've decided what they like, and putting some of these dream matches together can only help everybody. I just don't see a downside. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, it's still a business.
Yes.
It's still a business that, you've got to take care of your guys. You got an opportunity and an obligation, I believe, to pay your guys, to take care of your guys, and to especially put WWE, it's a publicly traded company. You have an obligation to shareholders, which I thankfully am one of them, because the share price has gone up a ridiculous amount, which I freaking love because I've had shares forever. But I think also it can be a smart business move. I mean, you put Nakamura in this spot, then you got Tanahashi retiring. Who's left? Your guy. I mean, your guy's going to be left, and he's going to be the main event of this thing, and he's going to be coming back to you. So I think there's a good business reason to do this, not just, to give the fans what they want. I think that's part of it, but also to put a lot of equity in your own guy, and your own guy come out of this a much bigger star, if that's possible, than he was when he went into it.
Speaking of Japan, over the weekend, we saw AJ Styles announce that he has wrestled his last match in Japan. We know that he himself is a former New Japan World Champion. He's announced that next year will be his last year wrestling. What do you expect from AJ? I got to tell you, I was tickled to see him get a proper send-off on the shoulders of some of his coworkers and things like that. AJ deserves to be celebrated. I'm glad he got that moment.
Man, when he came in, he just changed the business. I'm saying when he came in the WWE, and he already had this incredible Hall of Fame career before that, head of the Bullet Club and all the stuff that he did in Japan, all the stuff they did in TNA. When he came in, we got to be on a bigger stage I mean, he changed the business. I just always said he was the current modern generation Shawn Michaels. He just doesn't have a bad match. He's good at everything he does, whether it's a promo, whether it's a match, whatever it is. He's always in shape. I mean, he's as good now as he's ever been. It's kind of like Tom Brady leading the league in passing and then retiring. It's like, good grief, man. Get a little old first. I know he's older. He probably feels it more than he looks, but he looks tremendous. And his matches are now as good as they've ever been. And it's going to be a shame to see him go, but I think it's going to be wonderful to see the send-off that he's getting.
I, for one, can't wait to see it. It feels like it's going to be a big year. There's lots of rumor and innuendo that Chris Jericho is going to be doing a farewell tour as well. Who knows what's real and what's not, but I'm all for these guys getting to go out the way they want. And I can't help but think about our buddy Kurt Angle. I know that he wanted a different opponent for his last match. I know you and I both think a lot of the real life Baron Corbin. He's a tremendous guy. We're both big wrestling fans and big watch guys, and just have a great time catching up with him every time I see him. But I know that Kurt wanted a different match. And if Tanahashi really wants Nakamura, I hope that the powers that be will allow it to happen. Seemingly those same powers that be allowed, the ring introduction for AJ and his final match against John Cena to be introduced as the leader of the Bullet Club. It feels like it should happen. Like I hope that wrestling sort of warms up to the idea of, let's let these guys go out the way they want. Isn't that a good idea?
I think it is. Yeah. And understand it's still a business, but I think that's a good business decision.
Yes.
I think you're creating equity in these guys by letting them go out as these massive stars that they are. And whether you own the footage of all the parts where they're going out, I think you get the guy at the end of that is going to be yours. And I think that's worth every bit of it. So I think, the wrestling business has changed in that respect, that, you don't have the competition that you had 30 years ago. And because of that, I think more things are options than they would have been not too many years ago.
Well, we'll see what happens with Shinsuke Nakamura. We'll see what happens with AJ Styles. We'll see what happens with Chris Jericho. And I wanted to say we'll see what happens with this show, but it sounds like you've got an idea for new merch next week here on the program.
You dang right. Bradshaw's 316 says, I just stole your fucking podcast.
And we'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield.
Yes!
Mark.